LBR LBO Infrastructure Summit 2016.
Let's vision what this means. The panel is titled Housing for Cohesive Urban Communities. What does this really mean? What do these words really mean to us? Do we know a cohesive community or a cohesive city when we see it? Can you measure it? I don't know how. I knew I lived in 1983 in a city that was not cohesive because it blew up. But there has to be a better way to measure cohesiveness. What are the indicators for this? Nayana, let's start with you, and Lalit after that.
I think cohesiveness basically means, there's diversity and there's coexistence within this diversity. And I mean diversity in every sense of the word, whether it's ethnic, whether it's national, whether it's income group, whether it's men or women. I think basically, to me, again, this is my personal view, to me a cohesive society is where all kinds of people can coexist. And that's the kind of city I would like to live in, where you have, the nice restaurants, you have the Ministry of Crab, and then you have the Koto joint down the street. You have this mix, this hodgepodge, the chaos of Peta, a beautiful waterfront. All of this ensemble, I think, is what makes a nice city.
Okay, so diversity and coexistence as a necessary condition. Lalit?
Thank you. I think also, just to add to what Nayana said, is the kind of the mutual support system that people build by coexisting and living together. Even if you take, you brought up the point about 1983, and if you look in the case of 1983, you said the city blew up. Yes, it blew up. But if you looked at the low-income communities, the communities that we were talking about as underserved, nothing happened. And people were protected in those areas. So that is the level of coexistence that we need to recreate in our city on a wider scale. So that's the thing, that's the kind of ideal city that we should be aiming at, of creating, by bringing everybody together so that there's mutual support for each other, there's no security issues. If you create gated cities which require walls, guards, dogs, and all the security systems, if you create segregated cities. So the integrated cohesive city would bring people together, that they will take care of each other in a broader sense.
Shankar, have you looked at this in your study, what cohesiveness means?
So cohesiveness or inclusiveness, it's about looking all spectrum of people living together, not at a city level, and also at the micro market level, in the sense in the district level, and also at the community or the society level. So they need to live together, work together, and play together in all the three phases. One at the project level, one at the area level, and at the city level. So if you can create communities, if you can create infrastructure, if you can create housing to tie these three things together, that is work, play, and of course live, that is cohesiveness, according to me.
So you're really touching on where we focus. That unit of analysis is important. We could talk about the country, Nayana is talking about a city. You're even drawing it maybe even smaller. You could think about cohesiveness within a very small development and a building, right? How important is that? So, Nihal and the port city is unapologetic about the fact that it is for high net worth individuals to own a second home where they might come and work and play. And that's a quote from yesterday, right? And if Nayana is going to give us great transport, let's say instead of 1.5 hours from Malabar, it's going to come down to 22 minutes. Why can't the poor people who clean the toilets and issue government ID cards, the middle income people, all of these people live there and commute? 22 minutes is, in this example, not too bad to get a plumber in, right? What's wrong with that model? Nihal, maybe you can take that. Maybe you like that model, and that's okay, because the panel is actually full of very nice people who want everybody to live together. Yeah?
Uh, yeah, now the spaces, the cohesion, the different types of people living together. I mean, is talked of in cities which we have evolved over time, right? There had been, I mean, say, cities built, different types of characters. I mean, say, then people have come and lived in places where not planned for housing. So because they are there, then we have worked out systems for them to live, coexist, providing each other, helping each other. That's the thing. But in the megapolis, what Nayan and them they are talking of is the megapolis is a series of cities where each of these cities will assist the other one. I mean, when you talk of the technology city, you cannot expect everything to be provided within this technological city. And there is this industrial city where 100% of all the requirements cannot be provided within this technological city. And also, if you look at the series of cities that they have planned, there is also a residential city. There's also a forestry city in that. So all of them together will be the city, the megapolis, the main plan. So similarly, the port city is a place that we are planning now. Each centimeter of land, as I said, has a cost because it is not available and it will be built. So in a situation like that, I don't think we can start it on the day one by bringing in all the types of people into the system and allow them to occupy houses and all that. But also, if you look at me, I live not in the city center. I cannot afford it. I live in a suburb, and my bosses have said my office is in the city center. You come to work at 8:30. So there are different modes of transport. But now I spend about more than 1 hour coming there. Yeah, if there's a system where it is 22 minutes from Marami, I don't mind living there because you can get to the space. I mean, if the quality of travel is that much, people will not live, hesitate to live in those places. Now, before the Southern Expressway was built, going to Gaul and doing something there and coming back was a full day's event. Now, immediately after the Southern Expressway was opened, I mean, there were people going for dinner to a hotel in the southern end and coming back to Colombo for sleeping. Mm-hmm. I mean, that is the type of thing that you can do with improving the quality of travel and the intensity of travel. So with that, I think the living spaces also can be, categorized, and all of them together, like in the megapolis, will form into this one system.
So Nayana and Jeremy, let me bring you in, which is he's essentially having a vision of, the rich can live in the pockets, other people can live in the pockets as long as these nodes that connect them. Roads are one, maybe other pipes that run and connect our data networks is one. Rich people, you may not even need to travel into the city. Now the rich could maybe actually live in the suburbs, right? How does that fit with your vision of this city?
So I think it boils down to a question of choice. If somebody chooses to move to Malambe because maybe it's a nicer environment and take that 22-minute commute into the town, fine. It's a different proposition to say you must go. My aspiration, at least, is to say, look, let's give people the choice, give people a whole menu of choices of where they want to live that are all nice places, but let them have a choice. Mm-hmm. Now, the port city obviously is a commercial development. They're pumping in $1.4 billion. They've got a very specific business plan, a very specific target market. So to me, port city is just one piece of a much broader kind of downtown Colombo fabric. There's a question, why wouldn't you force Port City to build low-income and middle-income housing? I think it just doesn't make commercial sense. It doesn't necessarily need to happen as long as the open spaces, the beaches, the waterways are accessible to the rest of the public. Mm-hmm. Then I think it's really a non-issue. as long as we can create enough of a vibrant ecosystem just across the road in the rest of Colombo City, where we've got 226 acres of state land, for example.
Jeremy, the role of technology in this, can that help make those connectivity things? I mean, the answer seems to be yes.
Yes.
Then can we imagine a different kind of city, really, from this co-locatedness that we are talking about?
I think if you take, just to go back 1 second, I mean, the role of technology, if you're going to build technology into anything, the same way as there has to be a plan as to what type of housing you want to build, there has to be a plan as to what technology you want to build. Now, if you look at what's happening very rapidly in the country at the moment, is people are adopting technology even faster than they did when the GSM networks first launched. You have ICTA and Mohantan and the government pushing heavily for a fully digitalized society. Now, if you're going to end in a situation, or end point is where you want a digitalized society, if we talk specifically about housing, then you have to build into the housing like the same way as you build foundations, you have to build the connectivity as a foundation for all of those properties, so people can then use whichever device they want and have access to. Now, if you talk about how inclusive that can become, well, I mean, that's happening even today. I mean, even today at a broader level, you have companies here processing documents for companies in Europe. I mean, so Maldives is pretty close when you compare those types of things. So that's basically not an issue. The issue that I see more, and we have some experience of, is when a decision is made, say, to move a community, the solution that is provided in terms of the housing doesn't necessarily include many of the things that those people would require to make that a nice place to live. So, for example, I can think of examples where there is no, they've built 455 square meter apartments, but within those apartments, there isn't the infrastructure to deliver connectivity to each apartment. And as a consequence of that, it makes it not such a nice place to live. So technology can deliver to those things if it's thought about at the beginning. It can deliver high levels of security. It can improve the maintenance of everything. For example, it's very simple now to know when a light bulb's not working if you have the right solutions in place, and then someone can go and change the light bulb. You don't have to have people walking around saying that the public space is now dark, etc., etc. All of those things can be there, but it can't happen unless everyone decides and sits at the beginning and says this is the minimum quality or the minimum connectivity that's required, even at the lowest end. It doesn't matter. The high end takes care of itself, and I think some of those discussions that go on around land use and high end, they take care of themselves. But what you have to ensure, I think, is that for the middle income earners and for the low end earners, you have to deliver what's required for them to actually uplift themselves. And I think philosophically, the mobile phone industry has done that globally. I mean, that's the one thing. When I first came here 20 years ago, you couldn't get a landline, let alone a mobile phone. Now, everybody has a mobile phone. In fact, now increasingly everybody has a smartphone, not just a mobile phone. So I think it's a planning issue, but it's not a difficult issue because Sri Lanka is very lucky and it's very advanced from a connectivity point of view. It's far more advanced than anywhere else in this region.
So the technology can mediate space in a way that it makes space somewhat irrelevant to some extent, right? It bridges time and space, but space specifically in this conversation. And space matters to people. Location is important, where they live, even if it's on encroached land, something they legally own. What are the thoughts of taking people and moving them versus just developing where they are, and the opportunity cost, both social and economic involved in that? Because one could argue the Colombo, let's say, squatters, if you want to call them, are on prime land, right? Or in Noor area, you have identified key areas, prime government land that can be put to good use. Or you could just develop it for the low-end community, or try and mix them. You could move the low-end community out. This could create concentrations of different income. Or you could go the other way and have very mixed income housing. What are the pros and the cons? Shankar, if you could start, and I'll come back on the market mechanisms for these. But Shankar and Naina?
As far as redevelopment is concerned, I think this is the only model available. I mean, you have to, land
What
is the resource.
What do you mean by this? Which one? Relocation?
Land is the resource, not relocation.
Yeah.
Land is the resource. So you have to utilize the land where they live. And you have to bring in a private developer who can develop for them and utilize the excess land, because most of these people live at a level, in the sense they don't utilize the land to the fullest extent. So since it is going to be a really prime property, it is very important to utilize that land, in the sense, make a commercial development, and the extra land could be developed for the residences of these people. So that way, it makes commercial viability of the project in a good sense, and there will be participation from the developers. Otherwise, if there is no commercial sense or viability in a project, the private developer will not come and participate. So to woo the private developers to come and participate in this, you need to have these kind of models. Otherwise, it will not be a successful model. Even in India, we tried a lot of PPP projects, and wherever there is a prime property involved and wherever the commercial viability is there, there are takers. And wherever the land parcel is a little away from the city or something like that, and there are no takers. So it is very important for a private developer to look at these opportunities, encash on the land value, and also in turn provide housing to the poor where they live.
But isn't the viability for the commercial developer increased even further if you move the poor people out and give them housing somewhere else?
But how to move them out? Because you need to provide alternate housing. So temporarily during the construction phase, anyway, you have to provide housing for them temporarily. But if you have an alternate solution, already available solution, then it's fine. But you don't have, most of the cities don't have that. You don't have an alternate solutions permanently to relocate them. Even if you identify a location away from the city, what about connectivity? Because which one comes first is the matter. Whether the development, the existing development comes first, or the infrastructure or the connectivity to the new area which has been identified for them to relocate. So if the connectivity is not established, if you throw them out of the city, again, they are going to come back. This we have seen elsewhere. Mumbai is the best example. If you throw them out, again, they are going to come back in another 5 years' time. So how are we going to tackle this issue is very, very important.
Lalit, you talked, this is very related to this. You are talking about, I think your quote was people-driven, state-supported, market-financed, right? What does people-driven really mean? You talked about putting people at the center. What does that really mean?
Thank you very much. I mean, I can quote examples. Can I go back a little bit? For example, we talked about, what would be the most kind of financially feasible option in the case of Colombo. I mean, there are 1,053 settlements as called underserved. Out of that, something like 400 are fairly consolidated. They have built their houses to 2-3 stories, which really don't require any relocation or any redevelopment. All you need is to give them better access to credit, and they will improve further. I mean, there are settlements like that. But there are some settlements that are on prime land, which people can optimize their use by redevelopment. So those are, you cannot put all the settlements into one category. So there are settlements that have to go through a process of redevelopment. Some can be consolidated, and then there are settlements that are in very vulnerable places, like railway reservations, canal banks, and various other situations where relocation is the only option. But the relocation also has to be done through the whole process of people taking decisions and exercising their choices as to how do we relocate. Do we take the compensation and go out somewhere to a rural area and build a house, or we want to live in the city? And those choices should be open to people. That is the most important thing, that because if you create a process where people are allowed to take those decisions regarding how they house themselves, how do they finance themselves. By the way, another point is that in the city of Colombo, we should not be calling them urban poor anymore, because they are not poor anymore. Only out of this municipality survey, they found only 6 settlements which they call extremely poor. The rest are fairly well off.
But let me push back. You know, you're saying we should give people the choice. Some say, you know what, people actually don't know what's good for them, right? A slightly paternalistic view, and there's people talking about we can use, you know, paternalistic choice options to nudge people to make the right choice. Because people don't like to move, for example. And we have seen this repeatedly, right? And the fact that people don't like to move is shown because the local member gets de-elected in the next election in Sri Lanka when we try to move people from even one location to another, leave from one city to another, right? So one could argue this is not very palatable. Where has it actually worked? What does this process actually look like? What do? You go and tell them, here are the financial incentives, here's the negative side of it. Is it about education? What is it about?
Yes, there are many factors. Of course, over the years, they have built up their whole survival networks and that social capital that I was talking about. Incidentally, I mean, you all know that the whole is greater than the sum of parts. I mean, to demonstrate, to symbolize, I brought this glass, which is made of small pieces of broken glass, into a hole, which can actually contain some water for me to drink. So this is what I mean, symbolized by social capital, that people have come together and built that social capital, which we, as professionals and bureaucrats, we fail to recognize that there's a whole lot going on out there within the communities than we know. So the thing about the choice, and I disagree with you, pardon me, that we should not assume that people don't know. People are very, very intelligent. They know they know exactly what is going on. They know the tricks of the politicians. They know everything. And they will use the best option for them if the choices are given to them. So that is the kind of the building that they have created by living together all these years, the social capital, which we have to mobilize that to create a better living conditions for them.
Senarath, Naina and Shivankar, let me bring you in here, which is, where do these conversations take place? Have we been through a process like this? For example, in your Norelia example, what was the consultation process that we had with the people? Was there a voice? Is there some mechanism? Because there were people encroaching on this land, right? What was the process? And Naina, at a more broader level about the Western Megapolis region project. Is that conversation taking place? Is that a gap? And Shivankar, you are going into, for example, in the Kotte area, into some areas where some traditionally poor housing was there. And you, as a private investor, went in and acquired the land, but you still had a certain type of very extremes, you know, the millionaires row and then very small houses of people who had lived there. How do you now, as an investor, bridge that gap so those people don't come and, you know, start creating trouble, for example? Maybe we can start with Senarath. No.
Yeah, this very important question. How do we interact with the community? Actually, we had I think the 4 times we met the community. We discussed with them. They are not only the family, houses. You see, the impact is going to the commercial community. There are shop owners. So the problem was there for last 2 decades. They were fighting with the municipality. They were fighting with the all the local authorities to stay in the place because it not belongs to them. So after all, we have several discussions, and we met the leaders of the community, and I say we understand their language first, and we cater for their requirement first. Then we go to the authorities, like a municipal council, and say, see, these people are looking for this one, and we want to cater for them first. Then only we can fulfill your need. After we discuss all these things, then it came to the planning. And once we finalized the plan, only we came to the financing. So once we took all this together, everyone is happy. Like council wanted to do it, and investors wanted to do it, and people wanted to do it. Unfortunately, our planning authorities just dragging it. But it's obvious fact. Now, I mean, any development, and we should not think in our office that's all we know. As Mr. Lanka clearly said, he's one of. Now we have to talk to the people first and see what their expectation. Say you're building as far as if it is not matching the people's expectation, it's not going to be viable. That's what happening in Colombo. Even we plan one development Colombo city. The people are willing to come with our program. But I see that there's some people who are on the top level in our country say, no, that's not the way, this is the way. But the people don't like it. So what's the point? We are making development huge. You build a huge, nice city, but people don't like. So no point. So our approach, we first thing, we go and talk to the people. It can be a business community. It can be families living there. It can be community leaders, it can be even politicians. Politicians, they have a lot of interest on these developments. So we have to talk everyone and get their consent and develop our plan according to the requirement. Otherwise, it's not going to viable. Then only we can think about finance. Finance also is the main concern. Everything together will be the impact. Otherwise, the later, if you don't concern all these matters, you will see that too many issues are coming which the cost too high. Mm-hmm. It will double your cost to solve that problem. Maybe you are making endless problem, like we have already seen some apartment that maintenance issues is coming. So first we have to forecast and see this will be the problem. To understand the problem, we have to talk to the community first.
Okay. Nayana?
Look, I think there's actually a very interesting case in this in Strelave Island. UDA has two projects across the street from each other. One is Destiny, and the other is the Tartar development. And they both involved getting a developer in to extract commercial value and then providing rehousing to the settlement instead of a cash outlay for the land. And the way we managed the social engagement in the two was very different. It's two officers in the same institution. One was a phenomenal success. There was no real social issues. The people are quite happy. The development is progressing very well. The other one was very badly handled. Kids were screaming. We demolished bulldozed houses. We still see the footage of that over and over again. The project was delayed by a year and a half. So I think we have this experience.
So what was the difference? What made
the difference? Is how hands-on we were with working with the communities, mobilizing the communities, understanding what specifically they want, bridging the kind of gap between the communities and the developer, effectively the government taking the role of advocate for the community and saying, look, they need this, they need that, not the other way around saying, look, you guys are an inconvenience, please get out of the way. So I think it's the attitude you take and the way you engage with this community can fundamentally change the economics of the project. Because if you can get going faster and you can build it faster, you're obviously going to get better return on your capital.
Other than the process, were the incentives offered to the residents?
They're roughly the same.
Different?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's in a way a nice natural experiment.
It's literally across the street from each other, and the night and day.
So you would think the aspirations are similar, the people are similar, but you had different outcomes.
But I mean, the question of, look, have we done this for the broader megapolis? The answer is not yet. I mean, I think the point we're at now is we're trying to reach consensus internally within government saying, what's the best way to do this? I mean, we have a school of thought that says, let's put them in 20-story boxes. Some say 30-story boxes, some say 4 stories, some say let them be. So we still don't have consensus on that. And I think that's part of the process. We need to debate it. We need to kind of fight it out. And hopefully in the next couple of months, we will actually have a cohesive strategy and a policy framework, which we can then go out and work with the people to execute.
Okay.
So.
Shwant.
Yeah. Well, first let me talk about what we did through Fairway Holdings when we started building in the Rajagiri area. We, of course, understand that the community integration is very important. But there is one small difference in what we did. What we did was we created community centers, we repaired their houses, we gave new roofs to all the houses around there, we provide education facilities, books and everything else for all the children who live in the area. We have Montessori going on in the community center. We have English classes. So we engage with the community in many ways. But there is one fundamental difference. The people whom we engage with like this, I don't think we can classify them as squatters at all. So I think the problem we have with the megapolis, I think there are 2 segments that we have to look at. One is, of course, the squatters that we have in the Colombo region, right? And what we do with them. Second thing is that with the development of Port City, yesterday I remember it was mentioned saying that there will be 83,000 jobs created by the development of the Port City. Very good. But what does the Port City management expect these people to do? Come from where? To work in the Port City, go back where? I actually believe, I like to actually throw a stone among the pigeons and say, we really don't want squatters and really low-income people living around us. That's a fact, right? We can, in society, to be righteous, we can say all kinds of other things, but we don't. Land values, if there is a squatter community close by, is lower. That's already a part and parcel of our culture currently. So let's all say, no, we don't like it. The instant of, so I believe that the government, the developers, and the consumers of this luxury housing have a collective responsibility to provide for the squatters and for the workforce that we want around us. The problem with this workforce is we don't want them in our face, but we also want them close at hand to come and, attend to all our needs and work that needs to be done. So I think that is why I say it is the responsibility of the government, the developer, and the consumers of these projects. And like it was just mentioned, yes, there are 2 projects. Destiny is one of them. That this has already been done. That means the cost of having to build an apartment complex to house the people who are displaced, who are mostly squatters, I believe, who didn't have legal documentation for the land, was done. And that was part of the agreement in giving the land for that developer. So it is already been done. But with one difference, they've also actually gone and built the high-rise building which will house these squatters and the low-income group people right next to this luxury building that is coming up next. In my opinion, that actually doesn't work. I also believe that they are as uncomfortable. Low-income group people would be also as uncomfortable living next to a rich neighborhood as a rich neighborhood would be of a low-income group. I believe, first of all, like you said, if you have discussions with them, if you try and find out, we are all marketing people. We try to get consumers to buy things they don't want. Why can't we find out what these guys actually want? What will make them move? Now, if we are talking about, right, a lifestyle improvement for everybody else, if there is a lifestyle improvement for these people, wouldn't they willingly move? Would they move if they have education, if there's a school? Would they move if they have a hospital? Right? Now, in the megapolis development, we also obviously have the CDB. And then we have the downtown. And also, I believe that we have these satellite townships. Right? So maybe I would say the developers of the port city and the megapolis, right, along with the government facilitating it all, and also maybe some of the cost being borne by whoever who's going to enjoy these luxury spaces, should then develop some cohesive living standards and also improve the living standards of these people. If you can show that it can be improved, and also maybe like we said, okay, why would they go there? Maybe you have some employment opportunities in that area. Maybe the housewife who was at home can now do a small job on the side. Maybe use technology for that. You talk about schooling in this country. I lived in the South Pacific, which is geographically fragmented. And in schools, they use satellite technology. There is one teacher, and there are about 25 schools to which this person teaches. Just from a Skype call, we can do that. So I think we should look a little beyond that, and we should understand what these low-income groups need. Because one thing is, we need them as much as they need us, right? So I think we need to find an inclusive solution looking at all these different aspects.
So, Nayana, he's going back to that original debate we had, yeah? Which is, we want them to work, but both parties may be slightly uncomfortable. There's also a question of what kind of housing we give to certain types of people and what that entails in terms of security and policing and all, because there's evidence emerging that, high concentration of poor people in high rises may not be bad, and so on and so forth. How do you respond to this?
Yeah, look, I mean, I agree with one piece of it, is that they need us as much as we need them. The rest of it, we can agree to disagree. So here's the thing. I think basically there is no one box where you are poor and one box where you're rich. Wealth is a continuum. Wealth is a continuum, and I think cities should be systems where you are able to move from one end upward to the next. I think if we build a system where, if I'm a rich kid and I can look out the window and I don't see anybody else, I think that's a dysfunctional way to grow up. And I think in 20, 30 years, we'll have a dysfunctional leadership. Look, I have 3 kids. I had 2 kids and I was raising them in Manila. I was working for ADB, living in an expat bubble, right? You live in the expat housing, you earn an expat salary, you hang out with your expats, go to the nice restaurants, and you don't interact with Manila. And I found that personally repulsive after a while. And that was one of the reasons I actually moved back to Sri Lanka. And now I see my own kids, and they hang out with the kids in our community of all kinds of races. They crack vulgar jokes with all kinds of people. They've learned to interact with different sets of people. I think it just makes them better people. So it just goes back to this question of, I think it's convenient in the short term to say they, and box a certain group of people and say, they should not be here, why don't we get rid of them in some fashion? I think that's certainly an opinion, but I don't think that's a viable option for a country that is so diverse, that has a history of social mobility, that has high education levels, that is just waiting to jump. I'll give you a case in point. My current driver, he lives in a low-income settlement in Kulannau. His daughter did her first shy in A-levels, and she got 2 A's and 1 B. And she said, this is not good enough. I'm going to do it again. And she's shooting for 3 A's. She's almost positive she will go to medical school. I would bet, she's a really bright girl, I would bet in 10 years she might be buying one of your apartments. Because she's a brilliant girl. But that's because this guy lives in a low-income settlement in Colombo, and he has access to what Colombo is. And she looks at these people around her and says, you know what, I want to grow out of this community. I want to be one of them. But that's the society.
Aspirations
that's
and
the
social
aspiration.
mobility.
Sorry, I want to just add one point to this.
Quickly.
Yeah, very quickly. Just 2 things. One is that I don't suggest that we box them and put them away. What I suggest is that we also provide some mechanism to elevate their lifestyle, right? Maybe in the periphery, number 2. Second one is to interact with what you would call rich and poor. I don't think you need to live next to each other. Right? There are enough of ways that you can also interact. Just want to add those 2 points.
Right. I'm going to come back to you, which is, in a way, what you're saying is there's so much money to be made at the high-end luxury market. You can afford to be quite generous with the poor people, you can fix, or the middle income, whatever, all these other people who are not the in millionaires row, you can fix their houses, rebuild their roofs, you can build schools, you can do cool stuff for them, right? Are you in fact, so that's a completely different vision, right? What is it going to take, if you guys ever agree, the two of you, that's a philosophical difference, but financially, can you as an investor enter that middle income and low income market? When does that become attractive to you? Because clearly there's money to be made at the high end. Why is it not attractive to you? If, for example, you had the same social vision as Nayana, you don't have to. This is just a question about economics now.
Yes, I think it is matter of time, and people have to move into it. Obviously, when companies spend their time and effort, the management time and effort, they would look at the best option of achieving their objectives. But even companies who've started in super luxury apartment complexes are now moving down towards the lower levels, and so are it's happening the other way around as well. Mm-hmm. I think if private companies are to be encouraged to be part of this, that there has to be a facilitation from the government. Because if you would have to take the actual cost of land and develop, mm-hmm. then I don't know whether we can actually provide those housing at the prices that they require. Then also one other thing is that we are actually far behind construction building technology. Our construction costs in this country are far excessive than other countries. I'm sure my colleague from JLL can confirm this. So there has to be some impetus from the government mm-hmm. that will allow, for private companies to step into this arena okay. and do that. And if they are tied up, like the Destiny transaction was done, I think that would be the best way to do that.
Yeah, I then have a question for Sandra.
Just very quickly, on the point of are people investing in lower income projects? I mean, one of the things that we see is that there are the very big mega projects which are all very high line, but every Monday morning I receive a list of new projects which are starting, and the number of, if you like, apartment blocks which have between 8 and 20 apartments which are being constructed on relatively small pieces of land across the city is incredible. I mean, there's one street which has 5 or 6 of them which have just started in the last month. So, I mean, it's not just the big projects. There's a lot of development which is going on, which is outside.
I think there's a move somewhat to the middle. I would challenge you to show me that there's an actual market move to the lower end. I want to ask Senat this exactly, because who is investing? Are these people who have a social motive? Because we know that, when market rates can be had, there are people who still get into markets with social objectives and are willing to take a lower rate of return. Who are the types of people who want to...
The model I was explaining, we don't expect investor come and do their social works. The same thing is happening in the private sector also. If someone has a land, he can invest to a project. Say, for instance, my land value is this much. From the project, I expect this much of profit share. So the same thing is applying here. So what we plan as a government authority, the land we are allocating to the investor that the investor can't buy. It's expensive, and if investor invests on that land, he has to spend a lot of money. So that he can come and do the construction on our land. So the land is free of charge for them. And meantime, we expect fair amount of return for the value of the land. Land value plus the profit share. That we are going to use to subsidize the people already there, and if you talk about the shops and all, so there will be subsidized price for the poor people.
Yeah.
Not free. I mean, no, they will be subsidized. And the investor, he is doing his business. He is selling it to the upper sale market. We should not mix up. We don't ask to locate the poor person in next to the apartment of the this rich person. I mean, it's a budget. It's a program. that we will identify 3 lands. It's not disturbing each other's livelihood. So we'll take as a one package. Like you saw that there are 4 lands. So there's a one package. So we segregate, we know each other's expectation.
Yeah. So it's about this structure. I want you guys, you can respond, but address land as one of the key bottlenecks and how do we free it up. And he's come up with it's not giving it away for free, it's giving it to the person who asked for the lowest return on that particular block of land. Construction costs. What are the other ways of releasing up land in order to make it attractive for investors to enter almost the social housing entry level, not even middle income, I'm saying.
Yeah, if you look at the private developers, developers look at an opportunity with 3 costs. One is the land cost, second is the construction cost, and the third is the profit margins. First is the land cost. Land cost is so high, that is why you are looking at all the developers looking at the high-end luxury residential. Is there a way where the land cost can come down? Government should subsidize the land cost so that there will be takers for these kind of land parcels. The developer will come in and take this land at a subsidized rate and bring down the construction cost drastically by bringing in technology. Because nowadays, a lot of prefab technologies are coming in that can really pull down the construction cost about 20 to 30%. So that is again bringing down the cost drastically. And the third component is the margins. So no developer will work on less margin. I mean, margins are going to stay there. Even if they bring down by 5%, they would look at more volume. So government should give an opportunity for them to increase the volume of construction so that they can bring down the cost. So basically, we need to bring down land cost, bring down construction cost, and look at a volume where the margins are at par with their expectations.
Naina? Land, releasing, models.
Yeah, so I think Shankar's right. I think on the land, there are things that we need to do in terms of releasing land. And we actually have this accelerated program of middle income housing, which is releasing subsidized land for developers who can develop 80% of the housing stock on a particular site under a 5 million price point. You'll see ads and billboards around now. It's a completely market-driven process. So that is ongoing. But I just wanted to point out one other issue. We should get away from this notion that just because people live in informal or somewhat underserved settlements now, that they really can't afford housing. I don't think there's any discussion here, or there should be a discussion of saying, look, it should be free. But there should be a very detailed discussion on how do you provide housing finance. As Shankar mentioned at the beginning, our mortgage penetration is 6% of GDP. It's pathetic. You basically have to prove that you don't need money to get a house. So we're actually looking at that. How can we really free up housing finance? And how do you get these communities of middle income and low income access to housing finance so they can actually finance their way into higher quality housing? And that's, in a way, the interesting thing about Singapore. The Singapore public housing is $250,000 a pop. Mm-hmm. It's not cheap housing.
Yep.
It's just they have a very interesting housing finance system. So that is something we are sharply looking at and working with the banks on to try to get them long-term capital, because they basically take short-term fixed deposit money and they don't want to get give out long tenor loans. So we need to get longer-term affordable capital to banks so they can on-lend for mortgages and so on. So I think the housing finance sector is really where we need a lot of action.
And there's a significant role for the government to play in terms of free insurance and just facilitating that market, right?
I think there's a lot of role for the government, and there's also a lot of role for the private sector to say, look, how do you create product that makes sense? I'll take your PCC housing, for example.
Yep.
We spent $3.5 million on one of those housing units. We collect $1 million in principal over 30 years with no interest. So we're basically actually collecting a present value of $300.
Mm-hmm.
And of that, people are paying like 20%, right? But if you think of it the other way, here's an asset that has a value, a minimal value of $3.5 million, and you've basically been given away at 350,000 rupees. So the question is anybody willing to finance a 350,000 rupees and get a 3.5 million asset? Even if you have 20 or 30 or 40% default, you're still probably going to be up. So,
Yeah.
so I think we need to look at the finance space in a much more concerted way.
One last question, and I'll let each of you have the final word after that, which is the integration of transportation links and the residential areas that the Western Megapolis region envisions. There is sort of, areas called middle income housing somewhere in Aturugiriya. There's high-end areas. There's some segregation, but they also need to get to different places. Are these well integrated, the transport plan and the housing plans? This is a question for Nihal and for Nayana.
Yes, now the transport plan, yes, it is also done by the participation of the megapolis. So in that one, they have already looked at the port city, and the same system that will be available in the city of Colombo will also go through the port city, and because of that, it will be well integrated, and there will be the hub of this transport link at Peta, near the Fort railway station. That is the mode transport. So with that, there will be greater integration of the port city as well as the other housing areas of the city of Colombo.
Nayana, beyond Port City.
Beyond Port City.
Yeah.
I would say it's a work in progress. The idea certainly is clear and present. It's very much on our radar. We've actually started analyzing the land availability along the rail corridors that are to be upgraded. So, how much land can you actually stimulate for higher density development within walking distance from railway stations? So UD has done a pretty extensive analysis now on land availability, and that is something we want to operationalize. And we're trying to put this also into this middle income housing program where, if a site that is going to be developed is going to be within 500 meters from a station, you actually get higher density and so on. So the answer is yes, the principle is understood and very well integrated, but acting on it and implementing it is going to be an iterative process, so we need to get through.
Okay. My last question I'll pose to you and Lakshman, could we, do we want to have the commercial now and then we can come back for the closing comment?
You close it,
Okay.
then we will have the commercials.
So, each of you, in under a minute, if we agree that this cohesive community, if we think about the Western Megapolis as the unit of analysis, and we want it to be cohesive, there were words like diverse, where coexistence is possible, where social and economic mobility is possible. If that is the kind of Western megapolis that we envision, what is the one thing you would change or do better or wish for? So what is your main priority from your point of view? What is it going to take? You get to pick one. We'll start. Yeah, sure, Shankar.
Yeah, first thing is, first and primary thing, the key thing is the employment opportunities. You need to have employment opportunities for everyone, all spectrum of the population. Once you have an employment opportunity, making it informal sector, moving into formal sector, how to make, because I see a lot of informal activity in terms of employment happening all across Colombo. So how you are going to make it formal and inclusive in the entire, not only in housing, in the economics of the entire, the megapolis. So that is very, very important, and that's a key.
So formalization of employment and opportunities for increased employment.
Yeah, so that is a sustainable model.
Yeah, okay. Shivankar.
I would believe that with all this development that goes on and all these condominium buildings that we are putting up, there are two things that we sometimes forget that we need to address, and that needs to be addressed by the government.
One.
Okay, then I would say the final, someone said that we need to look at the whole life cycle. So we have to have a mechanism for disposal and reconstruction of condominium buildings. And I think we need to have the proper legislation in place I think it is already known, it is in the process, but it's taken a long time. I saw a question asked by somebody whether the Bambalapitiya flats are going to be demolished and a new development brought up. What is stopping that is that we don't have the legislation currently to do that. If one or two people who own it, oppose it, there's absolutely nothing you can do under the current legislation. So I would actually wish for the correct legislation to be in place before all this development happens, so that not only the beginning, but we also look at the end. And we can actually look at it from countries like Singapore. We don't have to invent the wheel. They have mechanisms, which I don't want to go into right now, which can be adopted in this country.
So that has an impact right now on the kind of skyline we can
For
have,
sure.
and also maybe 50 years from now when you're going to have a next cycle of investment, right?
That's right.
Jeremy.
I think one of the key things is that from my point of view is involvement tends to be after the fact, where everybody has planning and those types of things in place, but actually sitting down and deciding what is actually required there's so many different agencies that you have to deal with to get to one place, that by the time you've spoken to everybody, it's either half finished or it's not it sort of doesn't join up. And that's the biggest thing. For example, if you talk about transportation, there's a whole discussion about automated ticketing, et cetera, But basically, that runs on the same rails and tracks, if you like, from a connectivity point of view, as many of the other things that will be required for that. So my feeling is that at some stage, the whole base layer needs to be discussed as to what's required and spec'd out, and then that can be put into each of the sections very simply.
So that's really about big picture as well as who's at the table when that is discussed,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Okay. Let's go to Lalit.
Thank you. Just
I think
one.
Elani, we need to stop. 3:45.
I think we owe it 30 seconds from every panelist.
I see, okay.
Because you had technical problems.
Yeah,
so we need
just one point. I mean, the future vision of the megapolis is, my vision is that our children, or in my case, grandchildren, would live in a society that was very nicely described by Nayana, that we live in an inclusive society where the children can grow up together irrespective of
Yes, but
their...
what does that mean in terms of what you would wish for now?
That is my wish, that the design and the systems that we put in place for the megapolis development would create that environment for our grandchildren to grow together irrespective of their differences.
Okay, great. Nihal, Sandra, 30 seconds each.
Yeah, the most important thing, the one thing that we require for this system to work, in my opinion, is the reliable, comfortable, and affordable transportation for all people.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, I think we talk about megapolis. Housing, we can't take as a separate matter. It should be integrated solution. So like transportation and employment and schooling and hospitality, everything together only make a house and livable environment. So just talking about just building house is not going to work. So that's why we emphasize the decision-making organization like megapolis should be there to make a housing policy. The policy should incorporate all these other facilities. Okay. So it will be a viable,
sure.
Livable and environmental housing.
Okay. So I'm not going to wrap up. So Nayana, as the most hardworking person in the conference, because you're on, I think, all but one panel, if I'm not mistaken, two. Okay. You get the last minute.
Yeah, actually, I'd maybe take 30 seconds. I think in terms of housing, what I would like to see is a clear policy framework emerge over the next few months that considers all these varying viewpoints, because there's validity in all these perspectives. A policy framework emerge based on robust debate, an argument, and then some level of consensus, and a strategy that emerges that we can roll out over the next 10, 20 years to create the kind of society that Lalit mentioned about. So I think that would be my aspiration.
Fantastic. Thank you. Let's give them a hand.
LBR LBO Infrastructure Summit 2016.